Good morning. And so I promised you that this year would fly by, and it did. Not exactly in the way that we might have anticipated, but it did. And for our students, you will recall that not all that long ago, you were gathered here in the first week of the semester, and for your introduction and orientation, and now in a perfect symmetry, you're gathered once again in Miller Theater as we celebrate Journalism Day, just ahead of our graduation ceremony. This has been an intense year, as I promised, and I said that, when you come in, we're going to demand a great deal from you, that you'll work really hard and you'll learn a lot along the way, and that you'll imbibe so much that it may take you a while to actually realize how much you've learned. Well, that wasn't exactly true, because as events unfolded, one of the things that happened this year was that we came to understand that as an international community, the boundaries between what's global and what is local tend to disintegrate, and that we see international concerns register within our community and within our walls as deeply personal concerns for many of us. And in the midst of this, the kind of culminating point in April as we began to see the protests and occupation emerge, and in fact, the roles were reversed. Rather than you all needing more time to actually realize how much you learned, your professors watched as many of you went out and began covering the story that emerged on our doorstep, and it was our turn to be shocked at how much you had learned and to see how well you executed those duties. There's one story that I want to tell that kind of goes to the heart of our experience as many of us were in that improvised newsroom in the Brown Center. And this was at the point at which people had been covering this story for 2 weeks straight. Many people going out and filming and reporting and interviewing and getting context and stringing for national outlets and freelancing and doing all manner of journalistic work. And I got a kind of word that the police were about to come and they were going to break up the encampment, and I came down to the Brown Center, and I said there were about maybe 30 students there and a handful of faculty who were there, and I foolishly gave this speech and said, you all have acquitted yourselves incredibly well, that I've never been prouder of any group of students, and that your work will stand for itself. But the police are going to come to the campus very shortly, and so I would like for you all to report the remainder of this story from inside Brown. You can literally look out of the window of Brown, but I have to make sure, I have a responsibility as dean to make sure that you all are safe as well. And so there's no need to go back out. You've already done amazing journalism, and everyone kind of nods. It's like, thank you, and so on. And I leave the Brown Center. And then I'm walking, I'm going over towards Stabile, and I look over my shoulder, and I see every single person has grabbed their camera, their microphone, and headed out the door. There's just a stream of people going out the door. And I was like, Jelani, you have children. Why would you think? Because this was really the equivalent of saying to my 4-year-old twins, there's a birthday cake in the living room, but I want you to not go anywhere near the birthday cake. And they're like, sure, Dad, we will stay away from the birthday cake. But fundamentally, this is what we do. And we do it for reasons that are deeply important and deeply critical to our ability to function as a democratic society. And for that, you all have an additional level of our recognition, our support, and our respect. And so now, to introduce this year's Pringle lecturer. The award is named for Henry Pringle, who was a longtime member of the faculty of the journalism school, a Pulitzer Prize winner in biography, and a reporter for the Washington Post. The Pringle Lecturer is nominated by our full-time faculty for their outstanding coverage of politics and Washington. Please join me in welcoming the 2024 Pringle Lecturer, Caitlin Dickerson. Caitlin is an award-winning investigative reporter and feature writer for The Atlantic. She won the 2023 Pulitzer Prize for explanatory reporting. Over the course of more than a decade in journalism, she's been awarded a Peabody, Edward R. Murrow, Livingston, and the Silvers Dudley Prize for her writing and reporting. Before joining The Atlantic, she spent nearly 5 years as a reporter at the New York Times and has reported on immigration, history, politics, and race on 4 continents and in dozens of American cities. She's currently writing a book for Random House about the systemic impact of deportation on American society. Please welcome Caitlin Dickerson.
Good morning. I just have to move this, I'm very tall. So people always start speeches this way, but I'm genuinely very honored to be here with you all today. I've been so grateful for your recent work. Like a lot of people, I've been huddled on the couch in the evenings listening to your podcasts. I've been reading your writing on the subway. The body of journalism that you've created has been exhaustive, it's been clear. At times, it's been appropriately raw. I came to campus last week to talk with some of you about what these last few months of studying and working, more working than studying, have been like. And I heard a lot of you say that you were exhausted, some of you say that you were shaken up, but I also picked up on this really impressive self-assuredness about your accomplishments, a real confidence. I sort of expected to have conversations and tell you all, you know, you've got this, and you guys were like, yeah, we've got this, which I love. I also heard a lot of valid frustration over what you've been through, about the industry you're graduating into, so let's get into that a bit. I'm going to share with you some stories from my career that you might find helpful. I'm going to address some of those concerns that I heard, but more than anything, I want to congratulate you for your incredible work and to encourage you to keep going. So if you'd met me as a kid or even at your age, you probably wouldn't have guessed that I'd go on to win a Pulitzer Prize or those other accolades Jelani just mentioned. I grew up in Merced, California. It's a farming community. I went to middling public schools. I didn't get good grades. But when I went to college, that all changed because I had a major that required me to read a lot of news. Not only did my inner nerd come out and I start to get straight A's, but I was really moved by the impact that journalism was having on my peers and me. For context, I went to a very inexpensive public university with a diverse student body. I went to school with undocumented students, with wealthy Orange County conservatives, with veterans, with parents who were studying for the first time for their undergraduate degree. And we all got smarter when we read the news. It made us interested in subjects we thought we didn't care about. It challenged our assumptions about things we thought we already understood. We gained a sense of mutual understanding for one another that felt really important. So I decided to pursue it as my career. I had a kind of revelation about the role I wanted to play as I was growing into adulthood in American society, and I decided to take on what I think is a political identity of the informer. I'm asked about that all the time by non-journalists who say, okay, but don't you really have your own thoughts and opinions about the news? Come on. And of course I have my own thoughts and opinions. I'm not a robot. But I myself care more about what I can accomplish by telling other people's stories, especially people's stories who don't have, people who don't have access to a platform that is large enough and that their stories deserve. I care more about that than sounding off on my own views at the end of the day. As a journalist, you may not be in an activist role, but you are in a very active role. You may not push one side or the other, but you do give people the information they need to decide for themselves how to participate, whether that means to vote, to protest, to volunteer, invest, divest, challenge, support. That good faith exchange between information and action is how this democratic society should work. I want to be clear that I mean something very specific when I say that our job is to inform the public. And I think the easiest way to figure out if you're doing it right is to ask yourself, is this difficult? If it's not difficult, you're doing something wrong. So I'm not talking about cribbing from other people's articles or, God forbid, Wikipedia. I've spent days doing tedious research just to write a couple of sentences in a story because I felt they provided indispensable context. I've traveled across the country sweating because I don't know if I'm going to get the interview that I need when I arrive at my destination. I have faced a lot of rejection. I think that journalism in a lot of ways is about growing comfortable with rejection because none of us is entitled to any interview. That old saying, trust is earned, that applies to us too. Fun fact that someone who's become a critical source for me actually rebuffed my request to meet, even off the record, for 5 years until they came around. Your judgment is also very much a part of this process of informing the public. It's not a passive act. When you're done reporting, you have to determine what's important and feature it prominently versus what isn't, instead of engaging in false equivalency. You are human, so you'll have gut reactions to some of what you learn, but instead of letting them guide your storytelling, I want to urge you to pressure test those assumptions, challenge yourself every step of the way. Here's what journalism is not, and I think you all have demonstrated that you know this, but I want to put a really fine point on it. Journalism is not rewriting press releases in beautiful prose. It's not even taking press releases, fact-checking them, and then publishing a story. Journalism means, and this is what you've done, showing up physically to get the story yourself. And then you ask stakeholders to weigh in. You develop sources to gain access to good information, and then the most important part is that you verify it independently. You consider the motivations of the person giving you that information. Otherwise, your sources are working you, and they will try. Journalists tend to become known by a list of accolades attached to our names if we're lucky enough to have them. And they sound nice, but they obscure a lot of difficulty that goes into our work. I spent 5 years, more than that, I spent years reporting on the child separation policy under the Trump administration that separated more than 5,000 children from their parents at the southwest border. And when I first started reporting on this subject, the government insisted that family separations weren't happening at all. In fact, before my first major story was published, a government official requested a meeting with my editor and me where she told us that we would be misleading the American public if we suggested that family separations were ongoing. I heard her out. I raised the bar on my own fact-checking process. I confirmed with even more people that what I had learned was true. But in the end, it turned out that she was the one trying to mislead the public. Finding that out is the work of journalism, not repeating her false claims and then giving up. A few months later, the government admitted that children were being taken from their parents, but claimed in press conferences, TV interviews, and before Congress that these separations were an unavoidable outcome of their effort to simply enforce the laws that were on the books. This was also provably untrue. But while I wrote stories saying as much, some outlets credulously repeated this claim, or they repeated it with inconclusive pushback attached, writing what were essentially he said, she said stories, and leaving it up to confused readers to decide who to believe. This is at best an abdication of duty, and at worst actively harmful. So why does it seem like some journalists with big platforms forget this occasionally, including some of those covering the protests on your campus? The political pressures that we face and our own biases can make it easier to simply declare the truth unknowable than to work to find out what it is and face the consequences of being bold enough to report it. What's so special about this point in your career is that you're as close as you will ever be to your sense of mission, your ethical standards, and your responsibilities as journalists. After today, though, you're gonna have to go out into the world and uphold them. You'll face pressure from inside and outside the newsrooms where you end up. My analysis of immigration that faults both political parties to deal with this issue effectively isn't always the most popular. Neither is my refusal to say that our country's border issues have ended when the number of people crossing the southwest border goes down for a single month. I also refuse to say we're in the midst of an invasion when the number goes up. None of these things are true. I know that to be the case because I've had time to study the history of immigration in this country and the history of immigration enforcement here. I also know it because of where I grew up. But misleading narratives about immigrants are as old as this country. It's my responsibility to push back against them. I'm not willing to take a myopic view of the story when human lives are at stake. If as a journalist, you're just regurgitating what special interest groups are telling you instead of doing your own independent research and fact-checking, and if you're not using your own judgment, you're doing it wrong. I've been urged many times in my career, sometimes gently, sometimes not, to take on a, quote, better beat than immigration. I've covered many different subjects, and I'm sure I'll continue to, but again and again, I return to immigration because walking away from a story that is so poorly understood by the public would go against every impulse that led me to journalism in the first place. An editor once told me that family separations were, quote, last year's story, and that I should move on. I disagreed and kept going. And this is risky, but I'm gonna recommend it. If someone tries to talk you out of doing a story of undeniable import for reasons that don't seem journalistically sound, just try another editor. The stories I wrote afterward won the Pulitzer Prize, but more importantly, they laid bare what had been impossible to report on during the chaos of the separations themselves, that all of their negative outcomes, parents and children being lost, courts and detention centers becoming overwhelmed, relatives being deported without one another, these things were all warned of in advance. One report I found correctly anticipated, quote, new populations of US orphans. I spent years suing the government to get access to these documents. With the help of some incredible lawyers, I was able to view redacted details that the government had claimed would hinder law enforcement operations, when really, these details just embarrassed them. Imagine if the historical record on family separations didn't include that these warnings existed and were ignored. That would be the case without rigorous journalism. I mention that specifically because you have all now had this experience of covering what was the biggest story in the country, which typically comes much later in one's career. When the pandemonium cools, you might be tempted to move on. You might be urged to move on. I would advise against that. I would say stick around and dig in. You might end up uncovering something that feels like an essential part of the historical record, something we couldn't imagine not knowing about someday in the future. A piece of advice that I got early in my career that has served me, even as I have struggled at times to heed it, is that your career is a marathon. Don't go sprinting to your next Pulitzer Prize board citation. That's the worst way to find stories that matter. You're getting a lot of well-deserved attention and praise right now. You should be proud of your work. But don't let that enchant you so much with the sound of your own voice that you stop listening to the people you're supposed to be covering. Take your time selecting stories, be methodical, don't take shortcuts or fall into the traps that you see others in our industry falling into, either out of laziness or because they think mistakenly that it will bring them success. Protect your byline and your integrity, because that's all you have. Don't take the myopic view of a story if it doesn't merit one. Eventually, you will make mistakes. We all do, and that's okay. As journalists, we love to hold powerful institutions accountable and sometimes forget that we have power and we too need to be held accountable. I'm not talking about the flurry of bad faith criticism circulating today as an attempt to undermine the free press. Recently, I myself have started hearing that story is inaccurate about articles where people just simply don't like unflattering but true conclusions. That kind of deeply cynical criticism is a source trying to work you, and it's easily refuted by facts. But if critiques like the one I received attempting to discourage me from publishing a story about family separations come in, I urge you to hear them out, to look for evidence, and then use the judgment and skills that you've learned here to determine if they're valid. If they're not, go forth, knowing that you're doing a public service. If they are, don't give in to the impulse to get defensive and double down. Own it, fix it, and do better. I hope that some of you have the privilege of working in local news where the vigor with which you've reported on your campus is badly needed. Right now, in the Central Valley of California, where I grew up, people are running websites and Facebook pages with names that sound like legitimate news outlets and using them to spread misinformation. We need good reporting like yours across the country, because this concept of one person, one vote, it means nothing if people don't know what they're really voting for. For those of you who are lucky enough to find yourselves covering city council meetings and night courts in small communities in the next couple of years, know that your work is essential, even if it's not being featured on national television. I want to pause briefly to discuss the toll that comes from covering an impossibly devastating story like the one that you are. The amount of death and suffering that has taken place. For those of you covering it closely, it's almost unbearable to consider, and yet it's your job to consider it. I have some experience with unbearably sad stories. And I can imagine that a lot of you are sort of beside yourselves right now, especially if you have friends or loved ones who've been impacted personally. I wish I had a simple solution to offer you, and I don't, but I just want to acknowledge how painful it can be to write a story about mass casualties, for example, and then to go back to your apartment to try to have dinner with your friends. Sometimes being a journalist feels like living in two different worlds that are in complete conflict with one another. Again, I haven't figured out a solution to this, but the best advice I have is to slow down, even if it's just for 10 or 15 minutes every morning, and consider what you need that day. It might be to take a short break from your social circle. I've certainly done that. Don't make it too long. Isolation isn't a good thing, but it's hard, and sometimes a break is appropriate. It might also be the case that you need to do something you love to fill yourself back up, to energize you to keep going. I've always, as long as I can remember, been pretty overwhelmed by the amount of suffering in the world, and as journalists, we can't eliminate that, but we can help. I've been asked so many times how I was able to spend years thinking about parents and children being forcibly wrenched from one another. My answer is always that yes, it is a very painful story, but for me, the only thing more difficult than reporting it would be not reporting it. Lastly, just a little experience of mine I'll share. A couple of years ago, I was interviewed for a documentary by a prominent American billionaire in his 70s, which was an interesting experience. After we'd talked for a while, I could tell that I'd impressed him because he asked me if I ever planned to serve my country. He meant, will you ever work in government? To which I answered a quick and resounding no. But I thought about his question later that day. You know, when you think of the comeback after, it's terrible. And I realized that I hadn't answered accurately, because when he asked me if I ever planned to serve my country, I should have said that as a journalist, I already do. I thank you for your recent hard work. Your relentless reporting in the face of threats and intimidation has helped me see through misleading narratives. It's helped me discover that truths that had been labeled unknowable weren't mysteries at all. Congratulations for solidifying your place in history before your careers have even started. You have a lot to learn, but that doesn't mean you can't make a difference in the meantime, which you've already proven. As a peer, I welcome you to our ranks, and I look forward to working with you.
Thank you for those words, Caitlin. And now, Professor David Hagel will introduce this year's winner of the Mike Berger Award.
Thank you. The Mike Berger Award is given annually by the faculty of the journalism school to a reporter or a team of reporters for an outstanding example of human interest reporting. The award is named for the late New York Times writer Meyer Berger, nicknamed Mike, who was acclaimed for what was called in his day color reporting, meaning reporting with literary texture and emotional nuance. And he was revered as the master of the human interest story, to quote his obituary in the New York Times, stories of interest to humanity. Berger first made his mark as a journalist with a slightly different type of story. That was a coverage of a mass murder, a rampage by a murderer named Howard Unruh, who killed 13 people in Camden, New Jersey. Meyer went to the crime site. He interviewed 50 witnesses in one day. He went back to his office and wrote 4,000 heart-wrenching words in 2.5 hours. They were published virtually unedited. That is to say, in less than 3 days' time, he essentially reported and wrote a master's project. This is not an endorsement of waiting till 3 days before deadline. This year, my fellow judges Elisa Solomon, Sandro Stila, and I selected Sally Jenkins' richly nuanced story about the entwined rivalry and friendship of two icons of professional tennis, Chris Evert and Martina Navratilova. The story was titled Bitter Rivals, Beloved Friends, Survivors. Published in the Washington Post, it tells of how two women fought each other fiercely on the highest level of their art and developed a bond that only deepened further after 50 years when both were diagnosed with cancer. Exhaustively reported and beautifully written, Ms. Jenkins' piece is a great love story, told with rigor, precision, and rare sensitivity. Sally Jenkins has worked as a sports columnist for the Washington Post for more than 20 years. She has been named the best sports columnist of the year, it's a high honor, 4 times by the Associated Press sports editors. No slouches, and she is the author of 12 books on top of all that. A native of Texas, she was graduated from Stanford and lives in Sag Harbor, New York, but fortunately is here with us now. Please welcome Sally Jenkins.
Thank you. Good morning, colleagues. I can't tell you how thrilled I am to welcome you as colleagues into the profession. In talking to some of you this morning, one thing that I heard from you was the frustration that you guys experienced being locked out. Many of you were locked out and pushed to the periphery of the story that's been taking place here. And I just would like to briefly tell you, the periphery is where the best stuff is. The story that I wrote about Chris Everett and Martina Navratilova, counterintuitively, was a peripheral story. It's about two women aging, experiencing uniquely female forms of cancer, breast and ovarian. The public had lost a lot of their use for these people. They were no longer the immense stars that they once had been. But there was a fascinating dynamic between them going through this experience together. It's a story, I'm proud to win this award because it's a story almost nobody else saw. Because, in fact, I don't think anybody else saw it. I was lucky to see it myself, having known them and covered them for so long. But it was a peripheral story. And so I just would urge you, as you go into this business, to look at the edges. You've been on the edges. I know it's your great desire is to get to the center of power, to get to the center of things. But I would just urge you to continue working from the periphery in rather than from the center out. And so I'm so grateful to receive this award. I also want to congratulate Caitlin Dickerson. Your work is extraordinary. Peripheral stories, if ever there were, right? Brandi Kellam, the winner of the next award that you'll be hearing from, peripheral stories, if ever there were, and her editor, Lou, who's here with her today, with the Center for Journalism in Virginia. Again, a peripheral exercise. Correct? So I hope you'll think in those terms. You've been at the center of a great university and a powerful university, but now you're going to work on the edges, and I'm thrilled for you to go there. And I hope you find the interest and the joy that I have in working these stories from the edges. Thank you very much.
We have one more professional prize to award, to present, and that is the Paul Tobenkin Memorial Award. Professor Ty Lawson will present it to this year's winner.
Good morning. The Paul Tobenkin Memorial Award honors the late New York Herald Tribune reporter and recognizes outstanding achievements in reporting on racial or religious hatred, intolerance, or discrimination in the United States. I was joined by my fellow judges, Elena Cabral and Habiba Nashin, in selecting this year's winner from the Virginia Center for Investigative Journalism at WHRO, an independent, nonprofit investigative reporting news service that aims to probe issues vital to all Virginia residents. They collaborated with ProPublica for a series of stories called Uprooted. Investigative journalist Brandi, Kellam, and Lou Hansen, an editor and investigative journalist at VCIJ, showed how the expansion of a university destroyed a once vibrant Black community in Newport News, Virginia. Through the prism of public higher education in Virginia, this groundbreaking series illuminated how the universities nationwide have taken advantage of federal funding and court rulings to displace tens of thousands of Black families, often seizing property by eminent domain. The investigation showed that as Christopher Newport University's expansion squeezed out Black homeowners, its enrollment of Black students plummeted to less than half of the 17% it was in 1996. Sorry. Brandi Kellam is an Emmy Award-winning investigative and documentary filmmaker, a recipient of the 2024 Gracie Award. She has a distinguished reporting portfolio spanning several broadcast and digital platforms, including ProPublica, MSNBC, CBS News, The Chronicle of Higher Education, Essence, and BET. In 2021, Kellam was awarded a reporting fellowship from Columbia University's Lippman Center. Lou Hansen has been a journalist for more than 20 years in New York, Philadelphia, Hampton Roads, Virginia, and Silicon Valley. He's won numerous state and national awards and was a 2015 John S. Knight Journalism Fellow at Stanford University. Lou's the co-founder and senior editor of VCIJ. Please welcome Brandi Kellam and Lou Hansen.
Good morning, everyone, and really excited to be here today. It was mentioned, well, first of all, congratulations to all the graduates here. This is an amazing achievement, and as Caitlin outlined, you have a very long career ahead of you, so it's time to get to work. Also, as mentioned in the intro, I wanted to thank the Journalism School and the Lippman Center because the initial research and reporting for what became our Uprooted series started in 2021 with the support of a grant I received from the Lippman Center, and so it's like a full circle moment for me to be here in front of you today. And I appreciate your backing because it really laid the groundwork for our impactful series that is being honored today. So Sally's talked a lot about periphery, and I'm going to take a moment to talk about proximity. Newport News, Virginia is practically home for me. It's just about 30 minutes from where I grew up in the Tidewater region of Virginia. It is also where, as a teenage track and field athlete, I frequently competed on the campus of Christopher Newport University at its athletic facilities. However, even being from the area, it wasn't until 3 years ago that I learned, as a Black athlete, I had enjoyed access to facilities that were built upon land formerly owned by Black families who were forced out of their homes. I was seeking a better opportunity for myself through my own athletic endeavors, while these families were simultaneously losing a decades-long battle for the right to live in the only community many of them had known. In the late 1950s, as outlined in the intro, many decades before I even stepped foot on the campus, Christopher Newport was a small college, and Black families actually occupied the land, and they were seeking, prior to Christopher Newport being placed there, to establish a Black middle-class community at a time when, due to segregation, there were limited opportunities for them to do so. These families, including the Johnsons, who we outlined and portrayed in our reporting, collectively owned over 100 acres of land and had planned to divide those pieces of land up into individual lots and sell them to other Black families seeking the safety of a close-knit community. Instead of living out this possibility, these families were targeted by white residents and city leaders who opposed living near Black families. City officials seized the majority of their land in the name of public education, placing Christopher Newport University, at the time it was a segregated college, on the same location where their Black children had once played. While this racially influenced property seizure induced a local controversy at the time, when I learned about the history just a few years ago, little had been acknowledged by the city and college about the original takings or the fate of the remaining families who were pressured into selling their homes. Influenced by the shock of my own discovery, I sought out any remaining residents living in the area who would share their experience with me, and ultimately I landed on the doorsteps of James Johnson. James and his wife Barbara live in one of the last remaining homes of the Shoe Lane community, and the sight of seeing homes disappear around him created such a deep hurt that he spent the last 6 decades as an eyewitness, collecting photos, images, documents of his community's demise. Over the last 2 years, we spent hours at his dining room table, sitting through and sifting through news article clippings of the campus expansion and images he had taken of debris from demolished houses being hauled away by dump trucks. I spent more time learning and listening than I did speaking when I would meet with James. The more time we spent together, I began to fully understand what was lost to the Johnsons and many other families as we forged a closeness of respect and understanding. My proximity as a Black woman from the area who had spent 2 years with the Johnsons and other families who had expressed their pain and frustrations about the loss of their community and lack of accountability was captured in our series in a way that had not been covered by other media outlets in the area. Because of this, we were able to inspire legislation that may potentially provide redress to displaced families in Virginia. We also sparked discussion about a need for more accountability from colleges who have acted similarly, including the one we had gathered at here today. As reporters, we are not only storytellers, but we are witnesses to ongoing struggles and triumphs. Our proximity to these events allow us to tell the stories of communities we cover fairly, but with authenticity and empathy. As I hand it over to my colleague Lou, I would like to close by saying that I urge each of you to embrace the power of proximity in your own careers. Building relationships based on mutual respect and understanding, and use your insider knowledge to enrich your storytelling. By doing so, you'll not only amplify voices that deserve to be heard, but also create meaningful change in the world around you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Brandi, and congratulations to all you students out here, and welcome you to this great, righteous community that we call journalists. You give me great hope for the future of our profession with the work that you've been doing recently and the mission that we all hold dear. Very thankful for the Tobenkin judges for recognizing our hard work on Uprooted. Thank you again to Brandi, fellow reporter Gabe Sandoval, and to our editor Dan Golden at ProPublica. A lesson for young journalists: when you have a great editor, hold on. My gratitude is also to WHRO, a public broadcaster in southeastern Virginia, who brought me and my co-founder, Chris, into the newsroom to bolster investigative coverage just under 2 years ago. You know, Brandi has shared the story of Uprooted. Some of my reporting was spent in law libraries and archives, learning the 200-year history of eminent domain in Virginia. But I also got a chance to speak to some of the families who had lost their properties. One woman in Norfolk, Virginia, told me vividly the day 50 years earlier that the bulldozers came to take her grandmother's home. The children, grandchildren, aunts and uncles gathered to watch, most leaving before it was done, she said, because it was just too hard to watch. The state of Virginia just this week created a commission, the Uprooted Commission, to further investigate these property seizures and acquisitions in Black communities. We're extremely proud. I don't think I could have done this story today in most legacy newsrooms. It was a time and labor-intensive project about higher education and social justice. It would have taken reporters off their beats for months and wouldn't generate half as many views or engagement as a daily on, say, Elon Musk. So to me, it had to be done in a nonprofit. Projects like Uprooted are the reason that I started VCIJ 5 years ago. I spent nights and weekends while I was a working reporter in Silicon Valley to launch this project. I had worked in legacy newsrooms for 2 decades. Then I spent a year at Stanford on a night journalism fellowship, surrounded and inspired by entrepreneurial journalists, one of whom is a professor right here. So to me, launching a nonprofit meant a chance to grow a newsroom. Even as we were bootstrapping and high-fiving every $100 donation, it just seemed worth it. And when I grow my newsroom, I want journalists just like you. I so admire your courage in the last few weeks that you've shown. You've been on the front lines, you put yourself in danger, and to tell a story that the world is watching. You'll remember this throughout your careers. I wish I could tell you it would get easier. I've been a journalist since 1997, not special, unique experience. I've been shot at, assaulted, threatened, sued, evicted from public meetings, and kicked out of a war. But I think it's worth it. And I'll tell you a story why. As a courts reporter in Norfolk, a defense attorney told me about his young client named Travion Blount. One night in 2006, 15-year-old Travion joined 2 other teenagers and robbed a house party of a rival drug dealer. The teens threatened but didn't seriously injure anyone. They got a few bucks and some weed. They were caught quickly. I mean, they had robbed the people that they had once sold drugs to, so Pretty easy to ID him. The two older boys were both 18 and legally adults. They took plea deals and got 10 and 12 years. Travion wouldn't snitch on his friends. Prosecutors laid more than 50 felonies on him. He insisted on going to trial. He was convicted and sentenced to 6 life terms and 118 years. Mind you, no shots were fired. According to my reporting, it was the longest sentence in the US given to a child for a non-homicide crime. I first met Travion at a high-security prison in a remote Southwest Virginia. His hands and legs were in shackles, and he shared the story of his brief life with me and a prison guard. That story was the centerpiece of an investigation I wrote about the unusual laws in Virginia that allow children to be locked up for life. It ran on a Sunday. On Monday, the governor's office called. They wanted to pardon Travion. After many more court appearances and a second pardon, he was released in 2020. Virginia has reformed juvenile sentencing laws, giving other teens like Travion a second, third chance. Last year, Travion and I met again at a friend's funeral. We hugged. He was working in construction, raising 2 daughters, and just took a lease on his first apartment. He's home with family. He regained his life and hasn't wasted it. As journalists, we will bring change. The stories are out there. Go get them. Thank you.
And now we will begin the presentation of student awards. The first award will be presented by Professor Marguerite Holloway.
Hello. The Jean Anderson Climate Change Award is given to the student who has written the best feature story on climate change. The winning piece is about a carbon dioxide removal facility built in Kenya's Rift Valley, the first such facility to be constructed in Africa. The decision committee noted that the piece fuses excellent local and international sourcing, strong descriptive writing, and sharp, insightful analysis about how, as currently structured, carbon capture technology investments are poised to exacerbate existing financial disparities and social injustices. I am delighted to announce that the award goes to Lauren Watson. Will be presented by Professor Alexis Clark.
Hello. The Jean Anderson Local Journalism Award is given to the student who has written the best local feature story. The winning piece exemplifies deep reporting and strong writing that brings characters and their circumstances to life. This year's recipient humanized the men behind New York's halal cart industry, who leave their families and jobs behind in Egypt, risking it all, working nonstop to build their version of the American dream as street cart vendors. This year's award goes to Carla Marie Ponder Sanford. The next award will be presented by Professor Alexander Stilla.
Hi there. The Gene Anderson Social Justice Journalism Award is given to the student who has written the best social justice feature story. After careful deliberation among an impressive number of strong contenders, the committee selected Till the Last of Us is Free, Inside the Exiled Chinese Feminist Movement. The author did an impressive job in tracking down, reporting, and winning the trust of the scattered remnants of China's feminist movement, many of whose key members were arrested and or forced into exile after a series of brutal crackdowns in mainland China. Her main subjects were in New York, Washington, London, Italy, and an underground LGBTQ bar in an undisclosed Chinese city. She manages to forge a coherent narrative while simultaneously giving us memorable portraits of several remarkable women and telling the story of China's feminist movement from early in the 20th century to the present. She explains how the Communist Revolution moved from its initial promise of gender equality to its erosion in the past 40 years, beginning with the one-child policy, to the recent efforts of Xi Jinping to impose traditional gender norms and boost China's flagging birth rate. The award goes to Natasha Caragnano. The next award is presented by Professor Elisa Solomon.
The Nona Balakian Award was established in 1992 to honor the student who shows the most promise for achievement in writing about literature. Ms. Balakian, a 1943 graduate of the journalism school, was an editor at the New York Times Book Review and had much influence on American arts and letters for more than 4 decades. This year's winner has produced a body of work that demonstrates high commitment to writing about literature, and that does so with uncommon nuance, grace, insight, and enthusiasm. In a compelling profile of a contemporary novelist, this writer takes on the complexities of a dense, time-traveling, counterfactual novel about Korea. And in a work of long-form narrative, reporting, and criticism, she unpacks new developments in a centuries-old controversy about the so-called father of English literature, Geoffrey Chaucer. So, for this excellent work, the Nona Balakian Prize goes to Alison Amott. The next award will be presented by Dean Melanie Huff.
Yes, action item. Professor Richard Blood was a much-loved, no-nonsense, old-style newspaperman turned professor famous for his eyebrows and brusque style. He was also my first boss at the journalism school. When he retired, a group of his former students established this award in his name to honor the best investigative, hard news, or news feature story. For a sweeping investigation into how inexperienced companies won lucrative city contracts to shelter new migrants, the Richard J. Blood Award goes to Peter Sawfield for Profits and Peril, an investigation of New York City's migrant shelter contracts. The next award will be presented by Professors Bell and Hansen.
Hello, and congratulations. Each year, the Brown Tower Award celebrates the best in computational journalism. This year, Emily and I wanted to use some of our time on stage to take a moment to remember Fazl Khan, a graduate of the 2021 MS in Data Journalism, who passed away earlier this year. Fazl was working as a data journalist with the Hetchinger Report covering educational inequality. He had a singular talent for mixing data and narrative, and he is greatly missed.
This year, the Brown Tower Award, given in memory of Fazl, goes to a project that also marries complex data work and an important human story of decades-long court delays throughout India. This project built a specialized scraper specifically to help local journalists extract relevant cases from hundreds of thousands of files. The innovative approach to tackling an important accountability question at local level fits the mission of this award perfectly.
And the winner of the 2024 Brown Tower Award is Shalaka Shinde. The next award will be presented by Keith Goggin, class of 1991.
Good morning and congratulations, class of 2024. I am Keith Goggin. I'm a member of the class of 1991, which was a really long time ago, but I do remember this room fondly for so many years. I'm also a former chair of the Columbia Alumni Association and a current university trustee. I'm privileged to stand before you this morning on behalf of the Columbia Alumni Association to honor one of Columbia's most impactful trustees and a true university treasure. Bill Campbell, through the presentation of this year's Campbell Award, lives on in some of our most bright leaders. Before I present this morning's award, I'd like to say a few words about Bill. Columbia held a special place in Bill's incredibly generous heart. He was a graduate of Columbia College and of Teachers College. As a student, he was co-captain of the football team, which is known for being the last Columbia football team to win the Ivy League championship. He later became the team's head coach. That was a less successful endeavor for Bill. In his professional life, he became the trusted mentor and confidant of Steve Jobs, Tim Cook, Larry Page, Eric Schmidt, Mark Zuckerberg, and countless other tech titans. He was known as the coach of Silicon Valley. From 2005 to 2014, he chaired Columbia's Board of Trustees, and during that time, he was the co-founder and a great champion of the Columbia Alumni Association. Perhaps the keystone of the CAA's accomplishments has been the development of a culture we call university citizenship. University citizens think not just of their school or of themselves, but of the entire university and all of its stakeholders. A university citizen recognizes that we can all become better by working together, and Bill Campbell embodied this spirit better than anyone. The example he set inspires us all to do the same. Established in 2016 and presented each year at graduation, the Campbell Award recognizes one student at each of Columbia's schools who has exhibited Bill's generosity of spirit, his quality of leadership, and his devotion to university citizenship. This year's Campbell Award winner is from Sao Paulo, Brazil, and has over a decade of experience in education, social justice, and LGBTQ rights. He was a Lehman Fellow focusing on Latin America and on the far right's harassment of public school teachers. He was a welcome ambassador and senator for the J School, and his counsel was sought by many of his classmates and by the J School staff. It gives me great pleasure to present the Campbell Award to Wellington Suarez. The next award will be presented by Robe Imbriano.
Good morning and congratulations, everybody. The DuPont Judy F. Crichton Award was established in honor of a pioneer in documentary filmmaking, Judy Crichton, who produced docs for CBS Reports and ABC News, and was the founding executive producer of the PBS series American Experience. As New York City was overwhelmed with the humanitarian crisis to accommodate thousands of immigrants bused to the city from the southern border, the short film After Landing captures the experiences of one couple's quest for a better life. This deeply personal documentary explores the sacrifices Jezebel and Jorge endured to escape political persecution and brave the journey through the notorious Darien Gap to New York, Canada, and beyond. With sensitivity, intimacy, and insight, filmmakers capture the couple struggling to fulfill their dreams of supporting the children they left behind in Venezuela as their relationship is tested by the mounting stress of their new reality. After Landing documents the reality of the migration story tens of thousands experience: separation, love, despair, and hope. The award goes to Meyer Teixeira and Bebe Liu. These winners are from the August 2023 documentary class and are unable to attend today. We will mail them their certificates. And our honorable mention, 3 years after withdrawing troops from Afghanistan, coverage of those resettling in the US has all but disappeared. A New Home, Samir's story, shares the story of 17-year-old Samir Ahmadi and his brother Najib as they create a new life in California. The reporting reveals how resettlement support is drying up as housing assistance has ended for the two stateless brothers. Reunification efforts for their parents in Afghanistan have ended. A New Home renews questions about our collective responsibility for the well-being of a family riven by US policy as two extraordinary brothers struggle to build ordinary American lives. The award goes to Jasmine Jiwa. And the next awards will be presented by John Greer, journalism class of 1981.
Good morning, everyone. I am John Greer, class of '81, and the son of Philip Greer. This is the Philip Greer Scholarship Fund Award, presented first in 1988 and established in honor of my father, Philip Greer, a financial correspondent and columnist for the New York Herald Tribune and the Washington Post, to recognize the outstanding financial writing in the Masters of Arts and Master of Science programs. In past years, the award's been presented by his closest colleague in the business, Meyer and Mike Candell, an esteemed graduate of the class of '53. Mike is still with us at age 93, but handed over the reins to me to make the award presentation this year. He created the fund in '88, as I said, after my father passed away unexpectedly on the job in Bonn, West Germany, covering the G7 summit. And Mike did the fundraising after that in his honor to continue his legacy of strong financial journalism. Much needed, I would say, as a former financial journalist and listening to all of the speeches today, that first of all, the thing I learned week one here serves me still to this day in a career not in journalism, which is follow the money. And certainly, even for those of you who are not going to be doing financial journalism, that's always the thing to look for first. Where is the money going? The other point I wanted to make about financial journalism is that there is the pushback, as you heard from those who want their stories told through press releases, is enormous. It is almost overwhelming. You can watch it every day on CNBC, et cetera, mouthing the words of the rich and powerful. Your job is to find out what they don't want you to say. This year, the MS Award winner is Joe Stoner. And the MA Award winner is Vivian Lin. The next award will be presented by Dean John Haskins.
The Fred M. Heckinger Journalism Education Award was established by the Heckinger Institute of Media Education at Teachers College and is awarded for insight and excellence in reporting and writing on the subject of education. This year's Heckinger Award goes to a story that impressed us for its powerful and deeply reported look at how disabled students are often poorly served by inadequate educational resources and by the bigotry of low expectations inherent in many special education programs. The 2024 Fred M. Heckinger Journalism Education Award goes to Alternative Abyss: How New York Schools Deny Some Students a Meaningful Education by Sarah Elizabeth. The next award will be presented by Professor Keith Gesson.
Hello, congratulations all. Don't forget to pick up your copy of N+2 at Pulitzer. Okay, thank you. This award recognizes excellence in editorial writing for her moving meditation on Palestine, her family, and the destruction of memory. The 2024 Journalism Editorial Award goes to Sama Kuleb. The next award will be presented by Dean George Miller.
Hello. The Peter Keller Prize honors excellent editing. It was created to honor Keller, who spent 56 years at the Wall Street Journal, where he started in the composing room and rose to national news editor. As night editor for over 25 years, he created one of the highest editing standards in the nation. He trained several generations of reporters and editors who call him the living legend of the journal. Keller reminds us that journalism is a team sport. We need great writers, but we also need great editors. The winner of the Peter Keller Award goes to someone whose generous, patient, and meticulous editing made her classmates' work look even better in covering religion class and other classes. The Peter Keller Prize goes to Anne Schmidt-Dubois. The next award will be presented by Dean Du Lin Tu.
Morning, everyone. Congratulations. I'm here to present the Joan Connor Broadcast Journalism Award. The Connor Broadcast Journalism Award is presented to the MS student who has produced the most thought-provoking and original television or radio reporting. It was established by Dean Emerita Joan Connor, class of '61, who had a long and award-winning career as a producer for WNET Channel 13. The winner of this award is Liam Mann. The next award will be presented by Professor Sam Friedman.
The Linton Fellowship in Book Writing is funded by the Linton Foundation, who by the way are also major contributors to the J. Anthony Lucas Book Prizes. And the fellowship is intended to encourage excellence in nonfiction writing by supporting the works in progress of young, new, up-and-coming authors. There are 2 Linton Fellowships each year that come out of the students in the book seminar. The first of this year's recipients is working on a book about a concept I had not been familiar with till reading her work. It's called a sacrifice zone. A sacrifice zone is a term that comes out of agriculture and originally meant land that has been depleted by being over-farmed and has to be left fallow. But in the work of this student, it refers to the town of Lake Charles, Louisiana, a place that's going to be vulnerable to being destroyed by the climate change that's partly caused by the fossil fuel industry on which the economy of Lake Charles depends. The first of the Linton Fellowships, then, goes to the author of that book in progress, Lauren Rosenthal. The second of the Linton Fellowships, not in any particular order, they're co-equal, goes to a book about of the 2-century-long narrative history of the Arabic language's encounter with America, a language that's been both embraced and exploited, that's been used by well-intended, somewhat naive missionaries, by immigrants from Arab lands themselves, by political activists of the left and right in this country. And this book in progress is done by the winner of the second Linton Fellowship, Caitlin Hashem. The next award will be given by Professor Nick Lemon.
Hi, I'm presenting the Arthur J. Harris Memorial Prize, and I'm afraid I'm not able to tell you who Arthur J. Harris was, but I'm sure he's worth remembering. And it allows an MA student to complete an ambitious story after graduation. I want to acquaint you with a good journalistic practice that we're going to exemplify here, which is if you're starting a big story and anybody asks you what you're working on, be a little vague, because there's so much of reasons for that. So for her proposal to produce an international reporting project illuminating war's devastating impacts on children, the award goes to Noor Edrias. And the next award will be presented by Professor Lisa Belkin.
Hello, all. The master's thesis is the single largest project most of our students undertake while at the journalism school or ever. And for the MA students, it is particularly ambitious. This year's class of 32 MA students have written a total of 1,714 pages containing 313,344 words, quoted 479 sources, and the longest, in case you were wondering, was 22,187 words. They traveled to do this. They traveled to more than a dozen countries and nearly as many US states, reporting from the Patagonia region of Argentina, courtroom 600 at the Palace of Justice in Nuremberg, a refugee camp in Cyprus, the US-Mexico border, the Kurdistan region of Iraq, a prison in Allegheny County, Pennsylvania, a marine research vessel off the coast of Belize, and an autopsy research lab in Chicago, among others. They understood that they did not do this alone, and they collectively thanked 545 people in their acknowledgments. Mostly friends, family, professors, advisors, and classmates, but one thanked the Chipotle near the New York Public Library, and 3 thanked Joe's Coffee. And now that they are done, it's time to celebrate their work with 2 awards specifically for excellence in the MA thesis. The first of these, the Mintz Fellowship, was established in honor of the crusading investigative reporter for the Washington Post, best known for his work exposing corporate misconduct in the tobacco, automotive, and pharmaceutical industries. He is still with us. He is 102 years old. His daughter-in-law is here today in his honor. It is given each year in the form of a thesis travel grant to 3 MA projects of high quality and ambition, which specifically cover international social policy. This year's Mintz Fellows are Lights, Camera, Sanctions, Inside Syria's YouTube Scene by Nora Adrias. Landlocked, the alleged expropriation of Assyrian-owned land in the Kurdistan region of Iraq, which was an audio project by Yasmin Al-Tawadi. And The Mother of All Crimes, The Race to Make the Kremlin a Nuremberg-Style Tribunal by Ekaterina Vinkina. And for the next award, the Best MA Thesis. A committee of 3 consisting of myself, Professor Bill Gruskin, Professor Del Maharaj, read all of those 323,000, or however many it was, numbers are hard, words. And I'm going to give these one at a time so they can bask, because the work was extraordinary from all of the MAs, and so winning this award was a remarkable accomplishment. Our first runner-up for Stranded on a Divided Island, revealing investigation into the false promises of a college education that lure unsuspecting refugees to Cyprus. I'm sorry, the second runner-up, sorry, Sarah. Sarah Shruhard-Lopez. Sarah, stay here so they can get a picture of all of you. Okay. I'm also a producer, apparently. For The Unfinished Utopia, a deeply reported look into the history and future of Mexico's Zapatistas. On the 30th anniversary of their rebellion, a jungle celebration that the rebels warned him not to attend, but he went anyway. The first runner-up for Best MA Thesis goes to Sasha Biazzo. And finally, A Window on Gaza, a sprawling yet intimate tale of the Netiv Hasara Moshav, the piece of Israel closest to Gaza. For this emotional and analytical tangle of history and the moment, one that is dispassionate but also searing, the first place award for the Best MA Thesis goes to Davide Lerner. And since I haven't been up here long enough already, I just want to introduce the next presenter by pointing out that he is not only providing a moment, but having one. Professor Ari Goldman is retiring after this year, and so this is his last journalism day. Professor Goldman.
I rise to present the Mecher Award, given in honor of Professor Melvin Mecher, who taught at the school for 28 years until his retirement in 1990. Upon his retirement, his students established an award to recognize the kind of hard-hitting investigative journalism on local government that Mecher was famous for. Now, if you've been paying attention, and I'm sure you all have, this is the second award given to honor a former professor at the school established by his students. Hint, hint. The other award came earlier in the program, and that was the Richard Blood Award. Now, unlike Professor Lemon, who did not know Arthur J. Harris, I knew both Mecher and Blood. Mel Mecher was my teacher. He was my RW1. Before reporting and writing were separate, there was something called RW1. He was my RW1 professor and a mentor to me, both as a teacher and as a journalist. And Richard Blood was the city editor of the New York Daily News, and he was a colleague when I began teaching here. Mecher and Blood had a lot in common. Both were exacting and very demanding teachers who expected everything of their students. Truth is, students were afraid of them. I was afraid of Mecher. Professor Blood passed away more than a decade ago, but Professor Mecher is still very much with us. He's 97 years old and lives down the block on Riverside Drive. I went to see him yesterday to tell him, as I do every year, that's why I judge this award, so I can go see Mecher. I went to see him yesterday to tell him about the winning story and ask him to affirm the choice of the judges. Professor Sheila Coronel and I judged it, and then we'd like to take it to Mel to make sure we got it right. The story is about how inexperienced companies won lucrative city contracts to shelter new migrants. Perfect, Mecher said after reading the first few paragraphs. The beginning has got some really hard-hitting information, and this is a quote from Mecher: bang, bang, bang. He was so excited by this story. Now, if the summary of that story sounds familiar to you, it is because the story also won the Blood Award. I am happy to announce that the winner of the Mecher Award is the twice-recognized student, Peter Salfield. The next award will be presented by my friend, Professor Azmat Khan.
I'm so excited for all of you, but I have a script, so. The Henry N. Taylor Award was established in 1962 by friends of Henry Taylor, a journalist who was killed on assignment in the Congo at the age of 31. This award is given annually to a student in the International Division who has demonstrated the qualities of a superior journalist. The award includes a grant providing for travel in the United States before returning to their homeland, and this year the award goes to Lilu Margeron. The next award will be presented by Professor Winnie O'Kelly.
Hello, everyone. It's alphabetical order. We're getting close to the end. If you're paying attention, we're at the W's. I'm delighted to be here for the James A. Wenchler Memorial Awards, which were established by the Pisces Foundation in memory of the former editor and columnist at the New York Post. The first Wenchler Award goes to the student who submits the best story on a significant international issue. For his sensitive, timely reporting on the appalling working conditions of domestic workers in Lebanon that is eye-opening, riveting, well-written, and deeply sourced, this year's Wenchler Award for international reporting goes to Davide Lerner. Okay, the second Wenchler Award is presented to the student who, in the opinion of the faculty, submits the best story on a significant national issue. For a deeply reported story about the difficulties members of the transgender community face when seeking health insurance in the United States, the Wenchler Award for national reporting goes to Francesca Maria Lorenzini. Okay, I don't seem to have an envelope for the next one, so you'll have to trust me for this one. The third Wenchler Award is presented to the student who, in the opinion of the faculty, submits the best story on a significant local issue. For a story about the attempts to clean up the Sawmill River and to make sense of the many factors that led to its becoming so polluted, the Wenchler Award for local reporting goes to Emily Njeyan. I'm getting a lot of... We found the envelope. Here, let's get it. Okay. Congratulations. Okay, the next award will be presented by Professor Juan Manuel Benitez.
Hello, hello, hello. So I'm pleased to present the Louis Winnick Prize. It is endowed by the Winnick family and given to the best story about New York City. And I think we can all agree which one was the biggest story in New York City in the last year. For his compelling and well-reported piece titled Breakthrough in Negotiations Between Protesters and University Officials After a Tense Night on Columbia Campus, the winner is Edward Lovelace. And now we're back with Dean Cobb.
I'm here to present the Ari Goldman Award. Oh, I'm sorry. I would now like to recognize those Master of Science students who will graduate with honors. Please stand as I read your name and I ask that you hold your applause until all names have been read. Chloe Appleby. This confirms that the most widely ignored sentence in the English language is please hold your applause until the end. Caitlin Balasegun. Curtis Brodner. Elise Sayral. Erin Davis. Chingwan Ding. Jillian Taylor Goodman. Caitlin Hashem. Jacob Ember. Emily Njayin. Mukta Joshi. Ariane Luthi. Liam Mann. Lilu Margaron. Vonda Meyer. Ashley Elizabeth Miller. Caitlin Moody. Trisha Mukherjee. Ella Larkin Napak. Chioma Wana. Jill Riley. Lauren Sanella. Nathan Siegelob. Natalia Silva. Jude Samar Subi Taha. And Juan Vasallo. Now we can have our collective round of applause. And now the awards to the highest achievers in the class. The 5 Pulitzer Traveling Fellowships are part of Joseph Pulitzer's founding legacy to the school. They're designed to enable travel and study abroad. 4 of them allow students to observe people, politics, society, and the character of the foreign press. 1 fellowship is presented to a student who wishes to specialize in criticism of the arts, drama, music, literature, film, or television. For all the winners, the award is a mark of achievement and a sign of accomplishments to come. The Pulitzer Traveling Fellowship for a student with a special interest in the arts and art criticism goes to MA student Hannah Davies. A second fellowship goes to Liam Mann. My pronunciation guide here says, like Liam Neeson. I don't think he looks anything like Liam Neeson. The third goes to Chioma Wana. The fourth goes to Ashley Elizabeth Miller. The final fellowship goes to the top graduate of the MS class, our valedictorian, Chloe Appleby. So one last thing, which is that, Natasha, I still have your certificate here, so make sure you connect with me after. This concludes the Journalism Day ceremony. Congratulations to you all. Please keep an eye out for an email from Dean Huff with final instructions for tomorrow's graduation, and congratulations.